Right. Ah, you must then. Yes, please.
After you finished the first law story and you sent it to the publisher, how many publishers did say to you, Joe, it is maybe a nice story to you, but not for us?
Yeah.
How many said no? Or was it one shot and it was perfect?
Well, I finished the first book, basically, is what happened. So I finished the first book of the 3. So the book was The Blade itself, became The Blade itself. And I thought I'd better see if I'm anywhere along the right lines. I'd spent maybe 3 years writing that book, so I thought I'd better start sending this out. I didn't have much idea what fantasy was like by this stage. I hadn't been reading a lot of recent stuff. And so I thought I'd send it out and just see how people reacted to it and whether it was on the right lines before committing another 4 years to writing the other 2 books or whatever it may be. So I started sending it out to agents. I mean, that's the usual advice in the UK is, try and get an agent first. So I came up with a list of about half a dozen agents who represented writers that were doing similar kind of stuff and specialised in sci-fi and fantasy, or at least represented it. And I did the usual things, which is to ring them up first, find out who to send it to, scrupulously write a good cover letter and send them exactly what they asked for, and they all rejected it. And it's interesting you say, did they say this isn't for us? They never say anything. And that's the thing you're not kind of really prepared for. I wasn't prepared for. I was prepared for powerful reactions to my powerful fiction. And what you get back is a kind of photocopied slip of paper saying, "Dear Sir / Madam, this book / novel / novella probably is / is not for us at this time, but may be for us or someone else at some point in the future." And then a photocopied signature. And that is quite soul-destroying or quite hard to deal with, because you don't know whether what you're writing is shit, for want of a better word, or what you're writing just isn't right for the market or wasn't liked by that person. And so the real lack of feedback is quite hard to deal with, or I found it really hard to deal with. You post, at that time, you'd post stuff off and you'd include a self-addressed envelope for them to send it back once they didn't like it. And then you'd wait 6 weeks and you'll come back one day and you'll see your own envelope on the mat. And "Dear Sir / Madam, your book is not at this time." So, yeah, I got rejected by all the agents I asked. And then, purely by chance, a friend of mine who worked for an educational publisher and who knew I was doing it. I was very secretive initially, really, really secretive about it, but then I started telling people once I was submitting it. And he happened to be on a desk editing course, and he was on a course with someone called Gillian Redfern, who was just starting as an assistant editor at Glance. And when he found out what she was doing, he kind of said, "Oh, this friend of mine has written this fantasy thing. Do you want to see the thing?" And she was like, "Oh, all right, I'll look at the thing." She liked the thing. And I got an offer a week later. So that was great. And then I looked for an agent afterwards, and do you know what? It was much easier to find an agent once I had an offer than it had been before I had the offer. Yeah. So yes, there you go.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Any others? Yes, sir.
I read that for a lot of authors in the fantasy genre, maps are very important when they develop a plot or create characters or however. So for you, do you draw maps, or do you just add maps at the end when you finish the novel and let someone else do the design?
Oh, I draw maps, yeah. I've got lots of maps. I've got whole ring binders full of squared paper of every size. And when I was a kid and I was role-playing a lot, I loved maps, and I'd sit in front of Star Trek The Next Generation drawing maps on hex paper, every kind of paper you got, every kind of pencil you can imagine. I drew lots of maps, and so I still, do that. But I think, by the time I started writing, I was kind of feeling like you need a light touch on the world building, if you like, that the setting needs to be very much in the background, and when we came to publish the first one, although I had maps of the world and everything, my publisher didn't really want to include maps necessarily, just to say this is a fantasy book and look, it's got a map like that other book with a map that you liked. Because I felt like I wanted to stick close to the characters, you know, as I was saying earlier, and for it to be really character based and to put the reader in the head of the character, and not to tell the whole thing in big wide shots. And there's no wider shot than that map of the whole world right at the start of the book, so I felt to have a map in it was exactly the wrong message in a sense. And I think although, you know, maps can be great and maps are beautiful and I really love them, there is a drawback to having a map. It's a bit like, you know, that horror film where you never see the monster. Often it's more exciting than when you do see the monster. You know, having everything laid out in front of you is not always the most exciting and mystical and magical way to go about things. And so I've included maps in other books for all kinds of different reasons, and when I've done that I've tried to do something a bit different with the maps and tried to have some kind of artistic element to them that adds to the atmosphere of what's there. So with The Heroes, which is a book that takes place over 3 days and it covers one battle, I kind of had the dispositions of the different sides changing over the course of the 3 days, and that to me, you know, was a slightly different thing than had been done. I was used to seeing with maps in fantasy books, so I try to do something new with them, but certainly I have them. I mean, I think it's important to have things like timelines and maps and things that help you keep your creation at least a little bit rigorous, because if people notice mistakes and things that don't add up, then that's a problem, and you might as well try and get things straight in your own mind. That doesn't mean you need to lay it all out on the page for them, because I think when it comes to world building, like I was saying with Wizard of Earthsea, you know, the little details and the way the characters think, that can be much more powerful than any amount of kind of historical info dumping. As you know, this was the year when King Zarbulon invaded the lowlands and unified our 7 kingdoms into the empire we now inhabit, Bob. It's not that elegant. So I'll try to avoid that if I can. Yes?
Speaking about world building, a lot of authors put what their interests or special interests in their books, like they invented a language and they put it in the book or write a book because they want the language to use something, or currency systems, economic systems, stuff like that, or heraldry. Do you have something like that which you're hugely interested in and then put it in the book somewhere, or hide it there, or try to not put too much in it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess nothing that I'm obsessively fascinated by in quite that way. But I'm certainly interested in, you know, war, and I'm interested in economics, and I'm interested in how the two interrelate, you know, and the way that often there's not a lot of economics in fantasy, whereas in our world everything's about economics. And so, you know, I'm interested in banks, and I'm interested in money, I'm interested in industry and those things. And that's there in the books, but I wouldn't want to make it, you know, an obsessive, foregrounded thing. So I think it's about trying not to let your obsessions overwhelm making it a story about the characters front and centre, but just having that part of the texture and part of the natural background of what's going on. Yeah. Yes?
What do you do for fun?
Oh, I hate fun. I can't stand it. I avoid it as much as possible. I play video games, joylessly, obviously, and I watch a lot of TV. I don't read books because that's lame. Who reads books these days? Exactly. I read a bit of history, but generally I don't read a huge amount because it feels a bit too much like work. But I play a lot of video games and I watch a lot of TV, and TV over the last 10 or 20 years has just got so good, and the writing I think is so good. There's a lot to be learned, you know, from a series like The Wire or The Sopranos or Deadwood or any of these recent series that are so well cast and well acted and well scripted and well conceived. So I find just as much inspiration there as you might in books, sometimes more because the format is tighter, and you know, sometimes it can be a lot more elegant the way that things are done on film than in book form. So yeah, and I play video games quite a lot, I must admit. But you know, for research purposes. So writing about Vikings was necessary to play Skyrim for, well, how many hours are in the day? 24, so about 23 hours a day, I think. And You know, sometimes my wife would come in and say, "Oh God, you're still here? I thought you died." But because the room smells like you died. But yeah, I would say no, I'm working. Research. And currently I'm researching The Witcher 3. Which is very good. Enjoying that a lot. So that's what I do for fun. Oh, and I drink. There's no point in being a writer if you can't hit the whiskey, because it's kind of expected. So I do that too. I hate fun though.
Scottish or Irish whiskey?
Whiskey, so not Irish. It's just lemonade. I'm not a big fan of Irish whiskey. I mean, I'm sure it's lovely, but just not for me. Yeah. But yeah, Scotch and Japanese, and in fact, I have some Bavarian whiskey just down there. Yeah, I know.
Show it.
Well, it's in the bag. Sleers. Yeah. So there you go. Bavarian whiskey. I'll drink that later. Fun. Yes, sir.
I've read that you're a workaholic. Would you call yourself a workaholic? And when did you start to work in a day? You get up at 6 o'clock, you dress, and you...
No, I don't dress. We went over that earlier. Yeah. I'm kind of... No, I mean, I'm not workaholic in that sense that I spend every hour or spare minute working all the time. I mean, I kind of become... For me, I find the drafting of a book quite hard work. So I find, writing is wonderful apart from the writing, is generally the way I think of it. It'd be a great career if you didn't have to write stuff, but that writing stuff is a pain in the arse. So when I'm planning a book, I'm very inspired generally, and I work out my plans and what I'm going to do, and that's all great. And then when I start drafting, the first few chapters, I'm loving it, 'cause it's new and exciting, and then quite quickly I get bogged down, like a wheelbarrow running down a hill into a bog. Suddenly just stops and loses all momentum. And then it's quite a grind, usually, drafting a book. And as I start to get towards the end, I start thinking, now this is good. I usually hate what I'm writing when I'm drafting it and think, this is a horrible book, I'm going to be hated for this book, and when I die, people will say it would have been good if not for that book. And I say to my wife, this is an awful book, and I hate this book, and it's never been like this before, and she says it's like this every time. Get back in your room, stop playing Skyrim, get on with it. And so I hate every book that I write. That's about the size of it. Until I get to the end, and then I start feeling good, and I start feeling inspired, and I start revising and going over it. And hopefully by the time I get to the end, that first draft, the last part is good and tight and what I need. The first part is a mess. Then it's about going back and bringing the start into line with the end. And then I'll go over and revise and revise and revise and look at different elements of it. I'll look at the central characters first and their relationships and try and get as much personality into the voices as I can. And then I'll look at the secondary characters and try and make them as distinct as possible and give them more distinct mannerisms, try and get more personality into their way of speaking. Maybe previous events in their lives become a kind of repeated refrain for that character. And then I'll do a similar thing with the settings, and with every scene think, right, what's the time of day, what's the weather, what's the light like, what's this room like, is there one feature of this room that stands out? Does that then strike some sparks from the people in the room? Does it make them think of something else? Does it become a conversation with someone else? So I'm always looking for a kind of telling detail within a character, within a scene, that helps to make them individual, helps to make them, sharp and distinct from everything else. And so at that stage I start to become quite gripped, and I can spend 12 hours straight just sitting in front of it and going through it and really being obsessive about it. When I'm in the drafting phase, I'm constantly moaning about work and I'm constantly thinking about work, but I'm hardly actually working at all. I'm probably playing Skyrim for research purposes. Yes?
When you first started writing,
Yeah.
and you started building your first novel, you start building your world, your history, your characters, your plot, your vision, everything. And then you get into it. And how did you react to the point in time when you realized, shit, I never fit all of that into one book, I have to write another one and another one?
Yeah.
It was a bit of a shock to you.
Yes, it was a real shock, and I think writing the Blade itself took a long time, but then once I was up to speed with that book and I had those characters established and the setting established and I knew where I was going with the story, the other two books in the series were much faster. And the third book, Last Argument of Kings, it took me only about a year to write. Went very, very quickly for a book that big. And I felt like, well, my next book will take 10 months to write because I've practiced now. I've got it. I've done it. I can write books, I'll just get faster and faster till I'm doing them in a week. Like Mike Moorcock used to. Though he had to take a lot of speed, to be fair. But that didn't quite happen, sadly. When it came to, I was writing the third book, and when you set out to write a huge trilogy like that, the idea of getting to the end of the first book seems impossible, let alone finishing it. You never think about what's happening afterwards. And while I was writing the third one, my editor said, so what are you going to do next? And I had this hideous epiphany that, if I was going to do this as a career, I might write 30 books, 40 books, 50 books. And it was a horrifying moment. And so then I started working on Best Served Cold, and it was horrible. I hated it. I hated all the characters. It was like typing with gloves on, because I was used to these other characters. I could slip into their skin, into their voices very easily. Trying to write with new characters was just, I thought they were dull and flat and lifeless, and I didn't know what to do to change that because it had just been an instinctive thing with the first book. I'd had these people in my head for years, and so putting them onto the page was quite straightforward in a way. With new characters, it was a whole new thing, and plus I had readers, to some degree, readers waiting and a publisher waiting, so there was a level of pressure there I hadn't had before, and it was horrible, and I found it very, very hard. But eventually I kind of got a draft of that book together, and then I started thinking, okay, I know what I need to do now roughly to improve it, and as I revised it, it started to come together much more. And now I'm really pleased with that book, and I think, what was the big problem there? But I think I just had to learn that your book will generally be a bit of a mess till you get to the end, and then is the time to polish that turd into a diamond, hopefully. Yeah, you can polish a turd. Hello, yes sir.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
So what's your next project where you can use all this research you're doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure how useful that research is going to be in many ways. My next project is short stories, actually. So I've written maybe a dozen short stories in the First World at different times for different purposes. So I contributed short stories to a few different anthologies, and I've had a few that have been in special editions of the books for one reason or another, and they're quite hard to get hold of, because of where they've been. So we're going to collect all those together into one volume, along with maybe 2 or 3 new stories that haven't been anywhere else, and release that next year. So I'm just finishing those off over the next month or 2. I've got a couple still to write, and that's the next thing. And then there are a few other irons in the fire, but I've got to write another trilogy at some point, another adult trilogy in the First Law world, because I said I would, and signed the deal, and they gave me money, and I spent the money. So I need to deliver those books at some stage. We'll renegotiate about the money, my agent tells me, which is nice. I'll to put it there. Yeah, I need to write those at some stage. So there will be another adult trilogy in the First Law world, I think, at some point, depending on what happens with these other irons. Yeah.
Fuck them. Write the First Law trilogy.
Well, yeah, right.
I can go now.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, that certainly is that'll be my next kind of full-length fiction thing, would definitely be that, I think. There's not anything else that would appear. But because I haven't written a big adult full-length trilogy apart from the First Law, and that was a long time in the kind of growing and the thinking and the, the developing of those characters. So I want to take quite a lot of time to let this steep and develop and let some thoughts sort of work through. And ideally I'd like to draft the whole thing first, because I think it's very hard when you write a book and put it out, because you've got to rush it onto the marketplace. And then if you write a second book and you think, God damn it, I wish I had done this or that in that first book because I've got such a great idea and it's too late, you know. So I think writing all three together and having that coherence and then releasing them in your own time, on your own schedule, you know, very close together if the publisher want to, or space them out if the publisher want to, but know you're going to be able to hit the dates because the books are written and they're there, and just sharpen each one up as you in your own time. I think it means a longer wait for the first book, but hopefully, you know, much more controlled publication schedule afterwards, and hopefully better books in the long run. So I might try to do that. Although there's always this pressure: where's the next book? 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 Readers, readers now. If it wasn't for the readers and the writing, being a writer would be fantastic. Yes.
The podcast from Brandon Sanderson, Writing Excuses, they're actually talking to unpublished writers and aspiring writers. And one of the podcasts was about having this new writer trying to write his one golden idea into a novel. And I think it was Brandon who said that actually he wrote his golden idea that he thought was a golden idea, and it turned out it was called crap, and he was glad it was never published.
Yeah.
Did you have your golden idea yet?
I don't believe in them.
You don't believe in them?
I don't believe in ideas.
Right.
As anyone who's read my books will realise. No, I mean, I think, you know, ideas are everywhere. Ideas are everywhere, you know, and very occasionally a book or a story will be based around, you know, a kind of elevator pitch where you can say, you know, it's zombies in space or whatever. Sometimes there'll be an idea and you can just see straight away that's a great idea. But it's all in the execution still, you know, and great writing, a great authorial voice, a great sense of humour, a great character can make the totally dull and routine and often done seem fascinating again. You know, a book like, you know, a story like, say, Unforgiven, you know, the Western. A paragraph describing that story sounds like every other Western ever written ever. It's the texture and the way it's done, and the kind of the voice of the characters, the way it's shot, the way it's put together, that makes it totally fresh all over again. I mean, more than that, it's because it draws on all those Western conventions and those cliches, and it's full of old ideas re-examined. That's what makes it so good. And so, you know, I think when people say, I've got this fantastic idea for a book, I always think, that's mazel tov. You know, I'm very pleased. Come back when you've written the book, and we'll see. You know, because it's all in the way it's written. And that's why I'm always amazed when people kind of complain about someone having stolen their idea. Because, you know, it's just an idea, man. They're everywhere. And so I think, you know, it's a bit of a dangerous mindset as well to get into, that you're going to have this one idea, this one chance for a brilliant idea, because there are always more ideas. And in a way, that kind of plays into this cult of creativity and genius that people have around writing. It's about a stroke from the heavens. It's about something special, something unique, a talent, a gift. Whereas to me, it's about work, you know, and it's quite dull and humdrum and banal. And writing a book is like building a wall. You've got a certain amount of pages to fill, and you start slapping the bricks together, and eventually you have a book. And I think inspiration is great when it strikes. Ideas are wonderful when you have a good idea. But you've got to find ways to make progress when you don't have ideas, because they don't come that often. And you've got to have a kind of workmanlike approach and just keep writing. And often when you just write on a day you feel very uninspired, and you look back the next day and you think, yeah, there's stuff here I can use. You know, you cut away what's not good, and you're left with stuff you can use. And if every day you produce a few things you can use, you'll get there soon enough. So I'm more interested in craft and work and application, the earthy values that have made Germany such a great nation. Dan strokes a genius that you can't rely on, and that might, you know, come one day and then never come again. So, damn ideas to hell, I say. Thank you. How are we doing for time? Are we? We carry on, stop, keep...
Yeah, we have to sit here 5 more hours. And
Yeah. Well, when I say stop, I mean, you know, in 5 hours. I don't mean that. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take one final question. Okay, the hand went up over there. So.
oh, me!
So I want to go back to since so many questions came up about young writers want to know blah, and I would really like to know, like, let's go back to the day where you sat down for the first time writing your first sentence, because I know for a fact that you worked in a different job before. So one day you somehow found that arrogance around the corner that you could actually be some kind of a writer, and you have never written something before, but you found the power of ignorance, sitting actually down and writing something that made a lot of people come here to listen to you. So what was that little spark that hit you that one day that gave you the power to actually, like, do some, was it always your dream? Was it just a love for writing? Or why did you do it? Why did you sit up?
I had time. That was really the main thing.
I know.
She knows. I was a film editor, a freelance video editor working in TV, and so I'd have time off in between jobs. I'd have 6 weeks here, 2 weeks there. Even in a busy year, I might work for 40 weeks, you know, and have unpredictable chunks of time off. And after 5 years of just playing video games in that time, I felt like I needed some project to get on with that I would own, you know, because as an editor, you have an impact, but you don't really own what you produce. You come in, you do your job, and you go away. So I felt it would be interesting to work on something, and I'd always, you know, had ideas about writing fantasy, and that was, many of the characters had been in my head, and I just felt like I'd give it a try. And so I gave it a try and started to become quite excited by what was coming out, you know, which seemed to have this distinct voice and sense of humour, really, I suppose, that I found quite interesting. And so I just carried on doing it because I was interested in what was coming out, and I was interested in experimenting with how to write, how to pace, what details to pick up on, where to use dialogue, where to describe, how to write from inside a point of view and alter your prose style to match the thinking of the character and all that kind of stuff. So I just became very interested and kind of fascinated in what was coming out, and that was how I started, really. Trial and error, and a lot of going over and over and over things and thinking about how to do them differently, thinking about how I could do them different ways. And that was all. I found myself with the time, and so I thought I'd have a go. If I hadn't have had the time, I probably never would have done it. So I was lucky, and it kind of happened at the right moment in my life. And I was able to, before I didn't have kids at that time, I was able to put in a couple of hours every night. And quite soon I was just, you know, writing as fast as I do now, probably, because I was just quite inspired and thinking about it constantly and writing notes all the time. And when I'd come home at night after a day at work, I'd you know, put a couple of hours in and look over what I'd done the previous night. And quite quickly I found, you know, I love doing this, and I felt as though I'd be doing this all my life, really, even if I never got published, or probably not all my life if I never got published. But I thought, I'm interested in this. I was taking it seriously. I'm gonna do something. And when I was getting all those rejections of the first book, I did start writing something else, thinking I'll write something shorter and tighter and more commercial and easier to find a publisher, to see if I can get a publisher for something a bit less ambitious. But I got the offer before I got very far along the way. Time. And we are out of time, sadly. So thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thanks for coming.